final 4 arrow controllers are going to control the squishing of the tires and squashing when there's a lot of weight on it, or if we want to show more weight. So let's grab a hold of these guys, and we need to limit these, and we need to lock off any controls that we don't need to use. For instance, the scaling of this, we don't want to be able to scale the wheels or anything. So let's just grab them all really quickly, and I just want to do a freeze transform in case there's any extra transforms that are on there since we've been reparenting everything into the hierarchy. So just grabbing them all, going to hold on Alt, right click, and I'm going to freeze transform on those. It's going to make things a little bit easier. So we want to be able to move these up and down. Now we don't want full control like this because we have a controller at the bottom here that's going to do the same thing. So the up and down motion of this is going to allow us to move the wheel around, and this is just going to really squish it down just a little bit. So we need to lock off a few controls first. So that's pretty simple. So let's go to the motion panel, the hierarchy panel, and go to link info, and let's just lock out firstly the rotate and scale. So let's do that right now. We don't want to be able to rotate or scale this. And let's take a look at what we've got here. So the local y-axis is going up and down, so let's lock out the move X and Z. Looks pretty good. If we change this to parent, you can see that we've got the z-axis moving up and down. So this is going to cause us a problem when it comes to which axis do we actually lock out for this motion. So let's go ahead and try and work that out. So if we go back to the motion panel, come down to position and 0 position, and right now the parent is telling us that the z-axis up and down is the one that we should lock. And if we go to the local, it's telling us that the y-axis is the one we need to lock. So let's try the y-axis as its local for now. So let's go to the y position. Let's hit the assign controller button and do a float limit and do OK. And let's lock that. Let's just lock it to 0 and we'll see. So you can see that the y from the local coordinate system, we're still able to move this up and down even though it seems like we've locked this out. Okay, so let's move to parent and have a look at that. So the parent coordinate system, that says that it's the z-axis. So let's jump across to the z-axis and let's limit that. So assign controller, let's go to float limit, and let's put that at 0 and 0. And now let's see. Now you'll notice that we can't move this in the z-axis up or down. If we move back to local, we still can't move it up and down. So one of the things with local coordinate systems, it's not true. It really isn't. You need to be working on parent space all the time, especially when working with hierarchies. Local reference coordinate system, it just doesn't exist. There's mathematical explanations for this, but let's not go into it. Let's just realize that we need to be working in parent all the time to make sure we're understanding what we're locking and which one we're actually meant to lock. So let's knock in a -10. Because we don't want to, remember, we don't want to move this controller up over, we only want to move it down. So jump into a left viewport by pressing L, turn on the grid by pressing G, and let's take a look. So let's move this down in the z-axis, and you'll notice that we only really want to squish the tire. We don't want to be squishing, say, the disc brake or the hub of this. So let's move this back up, and let's limit it to, say, -5 or -5. So that looks alright. If I go across to the display panel, and I just turn off shapes, it looks okay, but there's a lot of tire that's going to get compressed at this point underneath this black line, which is the 0 line. So I'm going to really want to move that back up and just change that just a tiny bit to maybe -3. And then move that down. And now if I turn off shapes, I think that's going to be a better amount of compression. We don't want to compress the full tire at this bottom point. We just want to compress some of it. And I think -3 is going to give the best results. So let's go around to all of the other wheels and do that. So let's close that down. Jump back to a perspective viewport, and I can turn off the grid. Let's move forward to here. Once again, if we move that back to local, it looks like it's a y-axis that's enabling us to do this, but in fact we know now that we need to go to parent, and it's the z-axis that is going to be available. So let's go back to our hierarchy panel and let's start locking some stuff out. So again, let's do the X and Z, even though it says that Z is up and down, and we'll lock out the rotate and scale. And you'll notice that we can still move up and down. It's really bizarre, right? So if we go back here, we've locked out the X and Z, and it's telling us, hey, we can't actually move in it. And that's if we go back to local. So local will tell us that Y is actually up and down, and we know Y isn't really up and down. So let's go back to parent. When it comes to locking stuff out, we have to think of it in local space. So whatever the coordinates is, you know, you have to think about locking it in local space. But actually, what we're actually going to limit when it comes to a controller is we're going to limit the parent space of it. So with those locked, let's go back to the hierarchy mode. Sorry, the motion panel. We go to position, we go to 0. Now remember, in local it's up and down is Y, but actually in parent it's Z, so we'll lock the Z by a limit, so float limit. So knock that to 0, and it's -3 for the lower limit. Let's try that. It's perfect. So let's close it down and jump across to the other side. Again, remembering when we come to lock this, it's the X and Z we lock, and we get rid of the rotate and scale. And back to the motion panel, position 0 on the X, float limit, knock that to 0, -3, and finally, let's just check that before I move on. Alright, finally is the last wheel, so same thing again, back to the hierarchy, lock out all of the ones that I'm doing, back to the motion panel, position 0, position Z position, assign a float limit, knock that to 0, and this one to -3, and one more time just to test. Alright, excellent. So with that done, we can go ahead and save this file out, and in the next video we can start adding an FFD modifier to give the impression that there's some weight in this car and we're going to squish the tires.